Jameson Wright, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone in his silver Mercedes, tapping his thumb impatiently against the steering wheel. The air conditioner hummed weakly, barely pushing back the heavy heat of a summer afternoon in Savannah, Georgia. Retired after decades in the world of finance, Jameson was used to life bending to his will. But that day, stranded on a quiet country road with a flat tire and no signal, far from his immaculate estate on the outskirts of town, he found himself feeling something rare: helplessness. He had tried calling roadside assistance multiple times, each attempt ending in frustration. With a sigh, he leaned back in his seat and resigned himself to waiting. Just as the first waves of real irritation began to rise, he noticed someone walking toward him in the distance. It was a young girl, maybe 13 or 14, wearing a faded t-shirt, dusty jeans, and worn-out sneakers. She walked with quiet confidence, her gaze steady as she approached the car. Jameson sat up straighter as she stopped a few steps away, eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed the situation. Then she looked at him with a calm, respectful nod. "You got a flat, sir?" she asked, her voice steady and sure. Yes, I do," Jameson replied, surprised by both her presence and her tone. "I was hoping to get help, but there's no signal out here." She offered a faint smile. "I can help. My granddad taught me how to change a tire last summer. You got a spare in the trunk?" He nodded and gestured toward the back of the car. Without hesitation, the girl opened it and pulled out the tools she needed. She worked swiftly, her hands moving with a quiet precision that felt far beyond her years. Jameson stood watching, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something shift inside him, a humility he hadn't known he still possessed. He considered offering her money right then and there, but she was focused, fully immersed in what she was doing. A few minutes later, she stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and gave him a simple, satisfied smile. "All done," she said. Jameson reached into his wallet and pulled out a few crisp bills, holding them out. "Here, take this. I really appreciate the help." But the girl stepped back gently and raised her hand. "Thank you, sir. But I don't need anything. Just glad I could help." He froze, the money still in his hand, watching her turn and walk away down the long stretch of road. She didn't look back. And somehow that moment, so brief, so simple, stayed with him. Back inside the car, he placed the bills back in his wallet and stared into the rearview mirror, watching her grow smaller until she vanished from sight. For the rest of the drive, he couldn't stop thinking about her, the quiet strength in her walk, the ease in her actions, the generosity that asked for nothing in return. That night, in the grand silence of his home, Jameson sat in a deep leather chair in his study, surrounded by shelves of books he hadn't opened in years. His dinner, a perfectly plated steak with asparagus, sat untouched on the side table. He sipped his scotch and replayed the moment in his mind. He'd met thousands of people in his lifetime, businessmen, politicians, investors. Every conversation carried an agenda, a transaction, a price. But this girl, she had helped without expecting anything, just because she could. And looking back, Jameson realized she didn't seem like someone who had much. Her shoes were old. Her clothes were faded. Her hands were marked with dust and work. And yet, she carried herself like someone who had everything that truly mattered. The kind of integrity she carried felt rare in today's world. The next morning, Jameson Wright couldn't resist the urge to find the girl. He didn't quite know why. Maybe it was guilt, maybe gratitude, or maybe just plain curiosity. Whatever the reason, something inside him felt unfinished. He found himself driving down the same stretch of road, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of her. Hours passed as he stopped at gas stations and small diners, asking anyone who would listen if they'd seen a young girl matching her description. Most people just shrugged or shook their heads, until finally an older woman behind the counter at a small cafe looked up. "Sounds like you're talking about Jada," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "That girl's always helping folks around here. Lives with her mama over in Macon." "Macon," Jameson repeated, making a mental note. "Thank you." The town of Macon was about an hour away, nestled in the rolling green hills of Georgia. The drive was scenic, but Jameson barely noticed. His mind was racing. Who was this girl? What kind of home raised someone like her? When he arrived in Macon, the streets were quiet, lined with modest homes, corner stores, and porches with wind chimes that danced in the breeze. He asked around, and after a few friendly directions, he was pointed to a small house on the edge of town. The house was old, but cared for. The porch leaned a little to one side, but the lawn was neat, and flowers bloomed near the steps. Jameson parked and sat in the car for a moment, unsure of what to say. Taking a breath, he walked up and knocked gently. The door opened moments later to reveal a woman in her early 40s. She looked tired, but kind, her eyes sharp, measuring him with curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Jameson said, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, but I believe I met your daughter yesterday, Jada. She helped me with a flat tire." Her expression immediately softened. A quiet smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "That sounds like my Jada," she said warmly. "Always out there helping somebody." I wanted to thank her properly," Jameson said. "She wouldn't take anything from me yesterday." The woman nodded and stepped aside. "She's out back. You're welcome to wait." He stepped into the small home. It was simple, worn furniture, old hardwood floors, family pictures on the walls, and children's drawings pinned up like precious art. It couldn't have been more different from his own house, with its sleek modern finishes and priceless paintings. And yet this space felt warmer, more alive. She led him out to the backyard, where Jada was fixing a section of the fence. She looked up, surprised. "Hey, mister," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "What are you doing here?" Jameson smiled, feeling strangely nervous. I wanted to thank you again," he said. "You helped me when I really needed it, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Jada shrugged with a small smile. It wasn't a big deal, but to Jameson it was, and he was determined to let her know that. Jada leaned against the fence, her eyes thoughtful as she looked at him. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Her calm presence made him feel oddly small, like he was the one being evaluated now. "I don't think you realize what a big deal it was," he finally said. "Most people don't stop to help someone they don't know, not without expecting something in return." Jada tilted her head, almost puzzled by his words. "I don't see it like that," she said simply. "If somebody needs help and I can help, why wouldn't I?" Jameson was quiet. Her words were so simple, so pure, and yet they carried a kind of wisdom he hadn't heard in a long time. He glanced past her, noticing the fence she was working on. It was patched together with care, mismatched boards, some painted, some not. It wasn't perfect, but it held. Like her. Strong, quiet, and built on something real. The backyard told its own story, mismatched with panels along the fence, uneven patches of grass, and in the corner, an old swing set leaned to one side, its chains rusted and broken. It was clear that Jada's family didn't have much, but they made do with what they had, and they made it count. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Jameson said, genuinely impressed. "Your mother must be proud." Jada grinned, glancing back toward the house. "She works hard," she said. "I just try to help out where I can." Jameson stood silently for a moment, letting her words settle. He thought of his own childhood, once spent in a house not too different from this one, back when his parents had worked day and night just to get by, teaching him about grit, sacrifice, and decency. But somewhere along the way, caught in the chase for wealth and reputation, he'd lost sight of that. Now, standing in this yard, he felt something stir. A quiet mixture of nostalgia and regret. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," Jameson said at last. Jada straightened up, her smile fading just a bit, replaced by caution. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." "It's not about need," he replied. "It's about what's right. You helped me, and I want to return the favor." Before she could respond, her mother stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Jada, you better come in and wash up before lunch," she called. Then her eyes landed on Jameson, warm and curious. "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Jameson hesitated. Invitations like that weren't something he was used to, but the sincerity in her voice left no room for excuse. "I'd like that," he said, following her inside. The kitchen smelled of freshly baked bread and roasted vegetables. The table was small, surrounded by mismatched chairs, but it had been set with care and heart. Jameson took a seat, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored suit, surrounded by such warmth. Jada washed her hands and joined them, her easy smile returning as she sat. As they ate, Jameson really listened, as Jada spoke about school, her friends, and her dream of becoming an engineer. Her mother spoke softly, but with pride, about their community and the people who always looked out for one another. For the first time in a long while, Jameson felt something stir inside him. Peace. Laughter filled the room, stories were shared, and he found himself smiling without effort. Despite his fortune, his estate, his achievements, none of it had ever felt this real. After lunch, as they cleared the table, Jameson turned to Jada's mother. "You've done an incredible job raising her," he said. "She's got more heart than most people I know." She smiled gently, her eyes shining. "Thank you. She's a good girl. We've had our struggles, but we've learned to appreciate the small things." Jameson nodded, but his thoughts were already racing. He didn't want to overstep, but he couldn't walk away and do nothing. This family had given him something he hadn't even known he needed, a reminder of what truly matters. That afternoon, he left their home with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. As he drove back to his estate, ideas began to take shape. This wasn't about charity. It was about honoring the strength, selflessness, and dignity of that young girl and her mother. They deserved more than patched fences and old furniture. They deserved stability, recognition, respect. The next morning, Jameson picked up the phone and made calls. Lots of them. By noon, a plan was in motion. He contacted old colleagues, trusted contractors, and suppliers. Within a week, trucks and workers began pulling up in front of Jada's home. Jameson stood out front, clipboard in hand, directing the renovations like a man on a mission. Jada and her mother stood on the porch, stunned by the sight of it all. "You didn't have to do this," her mother said softly. "We've managed fine on our own," Jada's mother said, her voice trembling as she watched the crew unload supplies into the yard. But Jameson turned to her, his expression sincere. "You've done more than manage. You've thrived. But you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. Let me give something back." Jada stood quietly beside her mother, her usual brightness dimmed just a bit by the emotion of the moment. Her expression was thoughtful. Jameson knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "You taught me something, Jada. Helping people isn't about money. It's about showing up. And I want to show up for you." Over the next several weeks, the house underwent a transformation. The sagging porch was replaced with strong, sturdy wood. The leaking roof was repaired. The old rusted swing set in the backyard was removed, and a brand new one was installed in its place. Inside, the walls were freshly painted, the wooden floors polished to a warm shine. The kitchen was fitted with modern appliances, a fridge that worked, a stove that didn't need coaxing, cabinets that opened without creaking. At first, Jada insisted on helping. She carried planks, swept debris, asked to hold nails, and fetch tools. But Jameson, smiling, gently stopped her. "Your job right now is to enjoy just being a kid." Still, Jada couldn't resist sneaking outside to watch the crew work. Her eyes lit up with wonder as she watched them measure, saw, and build. One of the workers, a big, kind man named Joe, noticed her curiosity. "You want to help me measure these boards?" he asked one afternoon. Before long, Jada was asking questions about every tool in the truck. "How does this one work? Why do we use that one?" Her excitement was contagious. From a distance, Jameson watched it all unfold. A warmth settled deep in his chest, a pride he hadn't felt in years. For once, he wasn't building profits or partnerships or portfolios. He was building something that mattered. As the sun dipped low one evening and the project neared completion, the family stood together on the new front porch, staring in awe at the transformation. Jada's mother turned to Jameson, her voice full of emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore. It's a home. I don't know how we'll ever thank you." Jameson shook his head gently. "You already have," he said quietly. You reminded me what life is supposed to be about: family, connection, purpose. I think I'm the one who should be thanking you." The final day felt more like a celebration than a construction project. Neighbors stopped by to see the changes. Some brought fresh baked bread, jars of homemade jam, or a small potted plant. Laughter filled the yard. Jada's laughter. She ran around, showing her friends the new swing set, the freshly painted rooms, and the kitchen that now gleamed with possibility. Inside the house, once tired and quiet, life pulsed in every corner. Jameson stood on the porch, leaning against the new railing, watching it all unfold. He hadn't felt this kind of joy in years. Not the joy of success or power, but something purer, joy that came from watching others thrive. Jada's mother walked up and handed him a glass of iced tea. Her smile was soft, steady. "You've done more than fix a house," she said. "You've given us hope. And I think you found something too." Jameson nodded, taking a sip. "I have," he admitted. "I spent so many years chasing things I thought mattered. Money, status, influence. But none of it ever felt like this. None of it ever filled me the way this has." As the sun began to set behind them, Jada came up to the porch, her energy still endless. She looked at Jameson with those wide, thoughtful eyes. "Mr. Jameson," she said, voice full of sincerity, "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for us. I want to do something like that one day. I want to help people too." Jameson placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You already are, Jada," he said, his voice firm but kind. "Your kindness started all of this. Never forget that. Never lose that part of you." The three of them sat together on the porch, side by side, watching the sky turn gold, then amber, then deep violet. A moment of peace, a moment of truth, and a future quietly being rewritten, right there in Macon, Georgia. The sky burned a deep orange, the warmth of the day still hanging in the air, but there was a deeper warmth now, one that came from connection, gratitude, and a shared sense of purpose. When it was time for Jameson to leave, Jada and her mother walked him to his car. The girl's wide, joyful grin and her mother's tearful smile were etched into Jameson's memory as he pulled away from the house. But as he drove off, he realized this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. A new chapter. For all of them. The weeks that followed brought even more change. Jada's curiosity about construction, once a quiet interest, had blossomed into a genuine passion. She asked questions, sketched ideas, and lit up whenever someone explained how something worked. Jameson noticed and acted. He arranged for her to spend afternoons shadowing the very crew that had rebuilt her home. The workers were more than happy to teach her. Jada soaked up every lesson like a sponge, eager and bright-eyed, never missing a moment to learn. And Jameson? He kept coming back to Macon. At first, it was to check in, to see how things were going. But with each visit, something shifted. It stopped feeling like a trip and started feeling like a return to something real, to something that mattered. He no longer felt like a guest in their lives. He was part of something now, something bigger than business, bigger than wealth, something deeply human. And for the first time in years, he was content. The story ended where it had begun, in a quiet southern town with a big heart. A place where one act of kindness, from a young girl with dusty hands and a clear heart, reminded an old man of life's greatest lesson. It's not about what you have. It's about what you give.